Good morning. On March 16th every year, India observes National Vaccination Day. Vaccination is actually one of the most successful public health interventions in contemporary human history. Vaccine immunization currently prevents 2 to 3 million deaths worldwide every year from diseases like diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, influenza, and measles. The latest entrant to this list is the COVID 19, and it has brought the importance of vaccines to the forefront. Even as world over people are undergoing COVID 19 vaccinations, there are many lingering questions in the minds of people. This National Vaccination Day, we are in conversation with Padma Shri Presidential Awardee and Dr. B.C. Roy Presidential Awardee, Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, Chairman of Nephron Clinic, and deeply involved in the COVID 19 vaccination drive. He is with us to answer some of the queries around COVID 19 vaccination drive. It's a pleasure to have you, sir. Let's start with the basics. Over the last 1 year, everyone has become a lot more aware of vaccines. But, doctor, can you explain very simply what is a vaccine and how are they made?
Vaccine is any product which has been manufactured either genetically or non-genetically, which is either injected, orally ingested, or inhaled in a nasal form, which brings about immunity in a person who's vaccinated. So the person who's vaccinated tends to develop immunity over a period of days, weeks to months. A human being has four layers of immunity. So one is what we call as a vaccine or a natural infection induced antibody immunity, which is your B cell arm. B for boy, B cell arm. The second arm of immunity in a human being is what we call as the T cell arm, which is of the cell mediated immunity. That gives you the T cells. The third layer of immunity is what we call as in human beings is your innate immunity. Innate immunity is what every human being is born with. And last, most importantly, is adaptive immunity. Adaptive immunity is something which every human being, as he grows or she grows in age, with environmental factors, genetic factors, exposure to various infections, gastrointestinal disorders, and various other environmental manifestations which have on the body adapts to enhance or fine-tune the immunity. Now, when you talk in terms of what vaccines are and what they do, these vaccines are given right from the first day of life, and then gradually in a regularized program. There is a childhood extensive immunization program almost in every country which has been certified by WHO. These vaccines are agents which induce immunity. So this is called as an active form of induction of immunity. The immunity is based on three levels. One, it induces antibodies. These are protein particles in the body in which these antibodies are produced and they remain in the body. So at any future time when there is either a reinfection or exposure to any antigen, that means an outside protein of either a virus or a bacteria, like in COVID-19, it's a RNA virus, the body then hosts an immune response with your battery of antibodies, which are your warriors in your body. So they are ready to fight the wave of infection which comes in. Vaccines also induce what we call as a T cell immunity. Your T cells are of various types. There are helper T cells, killer T cells. They also have CD4 positive cells, CD8 positive cells. They work at different levels and different time frames. And these, along with your B cells, what we call as memory cells, remain imprinted in your body as your base, as your fabric. So these remember that if there is an exposure to any infection, so your army of warriors are then ready to host a good, positive, strong, robust immune response to any ongoing infection in future. So different levels of vaccines are given at different time frames to induce different levels of immunity. And immunity duration also varies from vaccine to vaccine. So some vaccines require booster doses at regular intervals. Some are given annually. Some are given single shot and they give a protection for life. So the earliest vaccines which were made, in fact, the father of vaccine program worldwide is Edward Jenner in 1796, where he discovered the pox vaccine. But the common vaccines which are used all over India and worldwide are things right from beginning of at birth is BCG, oral polio, injectable polio, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, measles, mumps, rubella, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, H influenza type B, typhoid, meningitis, human papilloma virus, and now the new entrant is COVID-19.
Thank you, doctor, for taking us through this vaccine development and how they build immunity in humans against numerous diseases. Earlier, vaccine developments, their formulations and certification used to run in for decades. But now, in the respect of COVID 19 vaccines, they stand out as being someone which has been fast tracked and quickly deployed. How are they different from the earlier vaccines?
I will draw a threshold mark of March 2020 as actually a watershed year in which suddenly there was a global and international par excellence and unprecedented collaboration in which they realized that these vaccines which we need for this deadly COVID virus has to come at rapid speed. And there are various international organizations such as Gavi and COVAX and other agencies, including WHO, which actually monitored these programs so that we can get a vaccine quick. Normally, a vaccine till last year onwards normally took between 10 and 15 years. So to give you a very quick example, the quickest vaccine to be rolled out before the COVID vaccine was mumps in 1967. Routine vaccines like influenza took almost a decade. The vaccine which took the longest time to make and manufacture and roll out was the varicella vaccine, which took almost 23 years. So there's a marked difference between what was happening earlier and what has happened now. So we saved a lot of time in time cutting as far as the approvals was concerned without compromising the safety and the ethics of the trials. Second is the trials took place individually in different countries and it went through three phases, phase one, phase two, and phase three of clinical trials. And before the clinical trials, there were two other stages, which was lab oriented, in which the vaccine was actually manufactured. And then finally the rollout. To go through the phases of the clinical trials, which includes safety, efficacy, and immunogenicity, the three phases, you require volunteers, human volunteers. And sometimes in large field trials, it takes many months to enroll these volunteers if it is done individually, separately, as different silos. But this time around in COVID, what was precipitating this rapid speed, what was called as RAP speed vaccination program, is that different countries collaborated. So to give you an example, the AstraZeneca vaccine, the trials took place in UK, in South Africa, in Brazil, other countries, let's say, for example, in Moderna or in Pfizer, there was a multi-country, multi-centric trials, and then the data was collaborated. It was analyzed. The second important point, rather, is when you're talking in terms of the technology, much has changed in the vaccine technology. Now, the mRNA vaccine, now through genetic engineering, was actually manufactured in a couple of days. That's what we say in colloquial language, over a weekend, because the technology already existed. So where did this technology actually first come up? It came up during the MERS and the SARS epidemic in 2006, 2010, 2012. It was even tried during the Ebola epidemic. And in fact, some of the mRNA vaccines were there as a platform ready. All it needed was to be tweaked. Now, when you come to the other vaccines, which are the vector-based vaccines, such as the AstraZeneca or the Covaxin, which is from Bharat Biotech in Hyderabad, these vaccines have used a very old platform and a time-tested technology, which we call as adenovector-based technology. Adenovector is a very common cold virus which infects all human beings. So they used a technology or a strategy which is called as a Trojan horse technique. That means this manufactured virus piggy banks on the adenovirus and it enters the body. So what it does is it bypasses various levels of the cell entry to enhance the immune response in a quicker time. So it piggybacks on this Trojan horse, which is adenovector, which the body has recognized for decades. So a lot of technology which has been used now is finer, it is refined, it is quicker. I think there is global collaboration. The scientists were not working in isolation. They all worked for the united purpose of survival of mankind rather than just manufacturing one particular vaccine from one country, from one company. So I think technology saving time in bureaucracy in terms of approvals and a very, very quick rollout has enhanced the vaccine into a year. Most of the vaccines, because it was just 1 year, came under what we call as EUA, that is emergency use authorization. But now a lot of vaccines are now being rolled out in millions now across the world. There are 5 good vaccines being used worldwide, and we haven't seen any serious side effects. So when you talk in terms of a rollout of a vaccine in the various phases, you look at safety. Safety is short term and long term. You look at efficacy. That means how good is the vaccine in the clinical trials. I must add the word efficacy, what we call as VE. Vaccine efficacy is not equivalent and does not translate to on ground in use vaccine effectiveness. That's a separate terminology and should not be used as synonymous words. But the vaccine efficacy, the WHO has recognized that any vaccine more than 50% efficacy during clinical trials is worth its salt. Most of the vaccines have crossed 66 to 72%. Some are crossing 94 to 95% efficacy, which argues very well. So the next platforms of the next, God forbid, there is a pandemic or an epidemic, or there is a newer research for a newer vaccine for either a virus or a bacteria, I dare say will not take more than a year, year and a half, or maximum 2 years versus 10 to 15 years in earlier times. So the watershed threshold of a turnover of understanding vaccine production, it has to be quicker, safer, and a rollout has to be massive at an immense scale, was actually somewhere in March last year. So it's complete kudos to the Indian scientists, because India is one amongst the only 4 countries which actually has rolled out not 1, but already 2, and we have another 4 in the pipeline. So maybe by middle of this year, we'll have 5 or 6 as an array of armory to protect the Indian citizens against this deadly virus.
Safety and efficacy are crucial when it comes to the accelerated rollout, the ones we are getting to see in COVID-19. For such deployment, the cold chain is one of the most critical component from labs to the last mile. Could you shed some light on what are the different kinds of cold chain requirements which are needing to be deployed for the effective rollout of the COVID-19 vaccination program?
Very interesting and critically important actually for a large tropical country like India, where temperature stabilization in terms of cold chain maintenance becomes one of the key and cornerstone logistic issues. And they say not only in India, but most parts of Southeast Asia and Africa. But before we address that, I think it's important, if you allow me a minute, just to highlight that vaccines are of different types. Now, when you talk of different types of vaccines, they are live. It can be for virus or bacteria. They can be live bacterial vaccines like BCG or the earlier typhoid TY21A. They can be live virus attenuated vaccines. Attenuated means these are blunted so that they don't cause infection, but the virus is live, like oral polio vaccine, like MMR, like chickenpox, varicella vaccines. There are inactivated vaccines like pertussis or typhoid, Salmonella typhi. There are inactivated virus vaccines like injectable polio, rabies, hepatitis A. There are toxoid vaccines like simple tetanus toxoids. There are capsular polysaccharide vaccines like pneumococcal or meningococcal, which are diplococcal vaccines. There are viral subunit vaccines like hepatitis B, which is recombinant technology. There are bacterial subunit vaccines like acellular pertussis and so on. Now, the vaccines require different cold temperatures at storage. And once a vaccine is opened, it can remain potent for X amount of hours or days before it is discarded. So, what involves a cold chain? What is a cold chain? Right from the time the virus or the bacteria is being genetically modified and a vaccine is being prepared, it is done under strict aseptic precautions at a particular temperature in the manufacturing unit of the factory where the vaccine is made. As soon as it is made, it is bottled, there are rubber stoppers, it is sealed, it is quality checked in terms of no active ingredients outside of what is allowed. They check the adjuvant, the temperature of the adjuvant. Adjuvants are buffers to increase the potency, that means immunogenicity of the vaccine, and also the durability, that means how long the vaccine can last in the market. And then it comes to shipment from the manufacturing unit to the distributors, to the retailers, and then finally to the end users. It can be hospitals, institutions, universities, and private doctors or government doctors. This entire chain takes a lot of toll on varying temperatures, especially in a country like India, which the temperatures in certain parts of central and northern India in summer can cross 40 to 45 degrees. A cold chain is a methodology in which different vaccines are maintained at different temperatures. So there are some vaccines which require 2 to 4 degrees, some require 4 to 8 degrees, like in Serum Institute and in Bharat Biotech, it requires 2 to 4 degrees or 2 to 6 degrees. And then once the vaccine is thawed, that means when it comes out, it remains active for X amount of days after it comes out from the ice box or from the cold storage. When you talk in terms of mass storage of not hundreds, not thousands, but millions of doses, then you need containers which can maintain the temperature and the quality check of the temperature at very large industrial scales. Till now, this has never happened in India. So what we are seeing now is something which is a complement to the Indian industries which have come to help the medical corps to maintain the temperature, because there is no point in getting a vaccine which becomes inactive or ineffective once it comes onto the field because the temperature is being destroyed. The mRNA vaccines, which are much talked about, the Moderna and the Pfizer biotech vaccines, which require minus 70 to minus 90 degrees storage, cold storage, and they remain active in normal room temperatures or normal refrigeration temperatures just for a couple of days. Now, there is a technology difference between a vector-based vaccine and an mRNA vaccine. So let's talk of the mRNA vaccine very quickly. The mRNA vaccines are genetically engineered and modified particles of the RNA which come into the body once they are injected. Because they are genetically modified, they are very liable to get disintegrated and destroyed, and at even human body temperature, which is internally 98.6 or 99. Now, when you talk in terms of how do you protect this particle before it gets destroyed, because we want the body to have immune response posted after the vaccine is given. So it is covered with a lipid particle, what we call as nanolipid particle. And these nanolipid particles are much like a butter covering on a fat covering on this mRNA. This butter melts with heat, literally so in common language. To preserve the external envelope, the covering of this genetically modified protein virus, it is to be stored at sub-freezing temperatures, which have been spoken of minus 70 to minus 90. Now, the vector-based vaccines have a God-given gift that because they are not the RNA genetically modified, these are inactivated vector-based platform vaccines of adenovirus. They can be stored for weeks together from 2 to 8 degrees, 2 to 6 degrees, 2 to 4 degrees. And we have been using the same kind of temperatures to store a host of vaccines including polio and BCG and the triple antigens, even now the combination vaccines, including the hexavalent vaccines, the pentavalent vaccines. The on-field maintenance of temperature is the key to success. What we very often don't speak about, and I'm very happy that the government has involved the private sector in a huge manner, because there is no divide between the government and the private in such unprecedented times. And the private sectors have come in with all their knowledge and all their expertise, and very often through philanthropic means, to help transport these vaccines, maintain the temperature, not only in metros or in tier 1, tier 2 cities, but outside, because this vaccine has to go to the last mile, the bottom end of the pyramid. So the vaccine storage of temperature is at various levels. Quality control has to happen at various levels, and it has to be maintained till the end user receives the vaccine.
That's very lucidly explained, sir. Just to build on your point, at Godrej, while working with the Indian healthcare sector in different capacities, and had identified two key challenges. One, which was on temperature maintenance of vaccines throughout its journey, the other was non availability of continuous power. With our decades of cooling expertise, we successfully addressed the concerns with technology which could maintain the chamber temperature between 2 to 8 degrees, completely anti-freeze without power for up to 15 days at 43 degrees ambient. We are the only WHO PQ certified Indian manufacturer and have now deployed our solution across 40 countries.
That is actually fantastic. But with your permission, if I may add, the cold chain, in fact, which companies like y'all are doing, also prevents something which we call as the ill effects and the hazards of plastics. Now, plastic has a wide using reach in vaccines, in syringes, and in other consumable disposables. And a lot of time, because of the heat, especially in the summer months in India, there is something which is known as the leaching effect of plastics. And plastics are now recognized by WHO to be potentially hazardous. They are called as labeled as pre-carcinogenic. It is anti-estrogen, it is anti-hormonal, and it causes a host of congenital abnormalities in the unborn fetus. So cold chain actually doesn't only, during the vaccine campaign, it not only prevents the degradation or the decomposition of the vaccine as a product, but it also prevents against the not so much spoken of, but an extremely important part of the hazards and ill effects of plastic.
Absolutely. When we entered the cold chain space, we realized that almost 60 to 70% of the vaccines, unfortunately, go waste due to subpar storage. We work with numerous stakeholders across the globe to address this and succeeded in reducing this wastage to a bare minimum. Dr. Bagai, you also talked about mutation and the pace at which this current COVID 19 vaccination program needs to be done to ensure that we stay immunized. So, if we have to get ahead of this virus, what are the challenges in scaling of our vaccination drive? What is the pace of vaccination drive we need to have? And what are the challenges in terms of skill and infrastructure point of view? If you could throw some light on that.
The first important thing is we need to immunize X amount in terms of millions or and crores of Indians to reach a particular figure, what we call as herd immunity. Now, herd immunity is a figure which is, or a terminology which is loosely used and poorly understood. So, herd immunity is a critical threshold in which a community and a society at large develops immunity, which is either through natural infection or indeed induced through vaccine as an active immunity, in which you stop transmitting the infection or the virus from one person to another. What it means is you're breaking the chain of transmission and therefore infection and disease. Classically, the globe has recognized a herd immunity to happen anywhere between 60 to 70% of the complete entire country's population being vaccinated. Sometimes it's very difficult to reach such astronomical figures, India being 135 crores. when you're looking at immunizing almost 60-70% of the population, it's a task of a monumental nature. Therefore, it is something what we call as time, speed, safety, and prioritization of different groups. So very quickly, we have to immunize in the first phase 3 crores, and in the second phase another 27 crores. That is approximately 30 crores in the next few months before the summer completely ends. So we are looking at immunizing for around 25 lakhs to 30 lakhs per zone on a daily basis. Now, when you're looking at this kind of vaccination across the length and breadth of India without compromising safety, with the monitoring of the patients post-vaccination, the vaccine is important to be time-bound and monitored primarily because you want to prevent every preventable death going on. The quicker the vaccines reach the humans in India or likewise in other countries all over the world, we will be able to get a grip on this deadly pandemic that much sooner. Now, when you're talking in terms of reaching this kind of immunity in a society, we have to keep in mind that this virus is a very smart virus. The RNA viruses mutate a little quicker than the DNA virus. What are mutations and how will it impact this vaccine drive? Now, mutations are something which we call as substitutions or deletions in the amino acid chain of the virus, which is a normal evolution phenomena of the virus to survive. So like we as human beings survive, the virus also has to survive. And over the course of centuries, viruses have learned to evolve and mutate. Once the substitution or deletion of the protein amino acids happens in the virus, the virus is called as a variant virus. When the variant virus has that much number of critical substitutions or deletions in the key areas of the genomic sequencing of the virus, it is then called as a strain which is mutated. That means at large, the virus has the blockchain abnormalities to cause an impact. Why is the vaccine time-bound program critical from a mutation point of view? When these mutations occur, like it has happened rampantly in UK or in US or in other parts of Scandinavian countries, or indeed in South Africa. So we have a host of mutations. We have a UK variant, we have a South African variant, which is called as P1. They have a Brazilian variant. You have a Japanese variant. You have more than 12,700 variants of coronaviruses worldwide till now. 7,000 in India. The common ones are 3AI, 2A, and so on. These have a 5-pronged impact on the COVID-19 infection. One, it makes the virus more transmissible. That means the transmissibility increases. Point number 2, infectivity increases. Point number 3, it becomes resistance to the neutralizing antibodies. Point number 4, this virus then can mutate even further, what we call as a pressure effect, and then cause more serious cases going into the ICU. And last, it causes more death. Quicker we reach out, quicker we reach a particular threshold of 30 crore to begin with, sooner we'll be able to get control on this coronavirus.
You covered a lot of ground. Let's break this into 2 questions. First for vaccines, single or double dose, and second for vaccine hesitancy. At present, most of the COVID vaccines require 2 doses given a few weeks apart. However, there are few candidates which are suggesting single dose vaccines. What's your thoughts on these? While there have been a minuscule amount of cases with vaccine side effects which have been reported given the scale of vaccination, we still come across vaccine hesitancy sometimes. How do you address this doubt in people's mind?
So the first part of your question is with regards to the timing and the dosage. Now, most of the vaccines so far, including both the mRNA vaccines, including both the ones in the Indian diaspora, which is the Serum Institute, AstraZeneca, Oxford vaccine, and the which is Covishield, and the Covaxin, which is of Bharat Biotech, they require 2 doses. The timing of the doses vary. The mRNA vaccines are given between a gap of 3 to 4 weeks. What ICMR has approved of both the Indian vaccines is a gap of 4 weeks. That is 28 to 30 days. Johnson & Johnson is now already launched a product which is a single dose. So I think a single dose vaccine will will help on three fronts. One, better compliance. It's a one shot. Point number two, the patients don't have to be monitored to bring back into the second time. And third, more important, is ease and convenience of administrability. So I think the two doses are what is being used at the present moment is a gap of 4 weeks. Very quickly, with regards the vaccine hesitancy, I think it's an ideal disaster cocktail of ignorance and arrogance. There is no question about the safety of the vaccine. There is nothing safer than safe. We've given hundreds and thousands and millions of doses worldwide. I don't think there is any significant side effect. In fact, the side effects of this are even smaller in terms of the minor side effects than even the influenza shot. Within the Indian diaspora, there has been no case report as death. This virus does not cause active disease. This virus doesn't cause any multi-organ involvement. It doesn't cause any impotence. It doesn't cause any brain or heart or spinal damage. Therefore, it is safe. In terms of efficacy converting to effectiveness, when you come on to the real world environment of effectiveness, so efficacy is something in a controlled ideal world scenario in which there are two groups, the vaccinated arm and the control arm. The vaccinated arm, as a double-blind control trial, is given the vaccine. The control arm is given a placebo. No one knows who's getting what. And then they see at the end of months and years together who has got a higher percentage of breakthrough infection. But that's in a controlled environment. So efficacy tells us as a difference between the two groups of how many got the infection and did not get the infection. That means vaccinated versus non-vaccinated. When you talk in terms of effectiveness on the ground, these are a large clinical failed real world scenario, and the effectiveness dips down for a variety of environmental and administrable logistic reasons. And this is calculated as a simple methodology of all the people who got vaccinated only. Now, effectiveness is on the ground is calculated on the vaccinated only, as how many people actually got the infection. So it is 1 minus the odd-on ratio, which gives us the effectiveness. Therefore, effectiveness really comes down a little bit as far as the efficacy is concerned. But any vaccine more than 50-60% efficacy in clinical trials is being proven by WHO to work very well on the field. But vaccine hesitancy needs to be eliminated. You need good public messaging, strong public messaging. I think the healthcare workers, crores of healthcare workers have come up first. They've taken the vaccine. I've got my 2 shots, well and alive, no side effect at all, not even local reaction, not even pain, no fever, no redness. So I think we need to spread the message, and every person needs to be transmitter of good knowledge and scientific facts. Every doctor should be a vaccine ambassador and tell hundreds of others, including the patient base and at large to media and portals like what you have organized today, that the vaccines are safe. Anti-vax, or what we call as vaccine hesitancy, is the worst thing which you can do to your country and to the globe. No one is safe till everyone is safe. I may be vaccinated with 2 doses, but I'm still liable to get infection. It may be milder, and I may be transmitting it to other people who are not vaccinated. I may not get the infection though. But therefore, we need to spread the message as quickly as possible, as large a number of people as possible, and with maximum safety. India needs to be immunized.
Very true. While the role of medical fraternity and government in terms of deployment is critical, citizens' roles are equally important. Ensuring good discipline in terms of social distancing, wearing masks, and general sanitization is something which must be focused and adhered to at an individual level. While herd immunity is where we are heading, it won't happen overnight. Until then, we need to preserve ourselves in these trying times.
So if a person as a human being gets any of the vector-borne viruses vaccine, let's say in the Indian diaspora, or dose 1 on day 0, after day 13 to day 14, your B cells, that means your antibodies, start building. They don't reach a protective level, but they start building. It takes at least 2 to 3 weeks for the antibodies then to continue to build to reach a protective level. Your second dose is given what we call as a booster. So that's your second twin engine, which fires the immunity further to give you not only B cells, but it starts inducing what we call as the T cells, which are critical in long-term immunity. Now, natural infection, a lot of people say, why vaccine? So, natural infection gives you antibodies, but at great health risk and loss of life. It's catastrophic to build herd immunity through natural infection. But natural infection gives you antibody protections maximum up to 3 months, and your T cell up to 8 months. But that's also poor immunity long term. Your vaccines give you more robust, more long lasting, and accurate immunity without getting the risk of the active infection. After your second dose, it takes another 2 weeks roughly after your second dose till your antibody levels reach a protective level. Your T cells and memory cells will continue to build for many months after that, maybe even up to a year. So when am I feeling reasonably well protected, but not giving up my mask? I repeat, even if you're vaccinated, please wear your mask. So I'm counting 4 weeks between the gap of dose one and dose two, and another 2 weeks. So approximately 6 to 7 weeks after the start of my immunization, that means 2 weeks after my second shot, I would have adequate protective levels of B cells and T cells in my body to keep me safe, but still wear a mask.
Absolutely. The world has risen to the occasion for creating COVID 19 solutions. And given what mRNA is capable of, I am sure this heralds a new era for healthcare industry in terms of vaccine, HIV, and many more diseases cure.
To comment on what you said is a very sensitive point, and important very quickly to address briefly though. One is with regards to this vaccination, I think everyone would understand that this has been a catastrophic, it's a frontal attack on humanity. I don't think even the world wars put together have taken so many innocent lives than this small little virus, which has been so slippery in nature that we are still unable to come to grips with it. I think India, in spite of all its deficiencies, has risen to the occasion, not only the doctors, but the government agencies and the private sector in a huge way. And very largely, we've been able to control it. Like I said, we are one amongst the first 4 or 5 countries to manufacture vaccines, and we are now actually distributing this to more than 40 odd countries as a philanthropic measure. Huge, huge, tall stature which India has gained. Uh, Two things I foresee which this pandemic has taught us, and what rather three things which is going to change in the near future. I think the chronic underfunding of public health worldwide has just been highlighted so miserably worldwide. I think India has already taken firm steps in that, in which the public health and the union budget now is only proving that public health will get a huge impetus and a revamp. Point number two is the awareness of health is now going to move not only from affordable, accessible, and accredited healthcare, but it is now going to move to what we call as preventive healthcare, predictive healthcare, personal healthcare, and primary healthcare. I think that's the main focus, to make healthcare individualized, and make a citizen feel a part of the decision making chain. He's not different from the doctors in decision making because it's that person's life we are discussing about. And last, most importantly, is the role of technology. I think technology is already taken a huge boost. Digital technology, tracking, artificial intelligence, logistics, supply chains, like your company is doing such a phenomenal job in the cold chain maintenance. I think these aspects of technology will be much spoken of. More investment is going to go, and not merely as investment, it's actually going to be what I call not as expenditure, but it will be an investment, because there is a return on of revenue on this kind of money which we are spending on technology. So I think the world will be a lot different. It will be, I hopefully it will be safer. Hopefully it will be better. I think the governments and the agencies worldwide finally have been shaken up. The next pandemic, hopefully it never comes, but we never say never. We have to be prepared for, with the platforms which we have built through technology and genetic engineering. The vaccines will be even quicker in terms of rollout. They will be even better in terms of efficacy and effectiveness and the safety profiles. I dare say that in the next few years, we may have a universal coronavirus vaccine, which not only prevents against COVID-19, which is SARS-CoV-2, but also against the four other common cold viruses. There may also be a universal vaccine for most other viral illnesses, maybe bacterial illnesses. So I think we're taking huge steps in terms of R&D and investment in innovation. Hopefully, the human beings worldwide will benefit from it.
Thank you, Dr. Bagai, for sharing valuable insights into various aspects of the vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccination drive, and the Indian healthcare industry in general. We are indeed pharmacy of the world, and with government's increased focus on medical health, especially in terms of preventive care and growing digital interventions in this space, our country will be strengthening this position. And this bodes well for healthcare and allied infrastructure of India.
And my compliments to your company for coming forward in such difficult times, working as one in unison with the citizens, with the government. I would especially, from the bottom of my heart, and I speak on behalf of almost every person in the medical fraternity, as a citizen of India, a proud citizen of India, being not only the vaccine manufacturing and usage hub, but the pharmacy of the world. We have done well. We need to be on guard. I want to thank every agency of every state and every part of the chain of the government, right from the Honorable Prime Minister down to the Health Minister to the state ministers. I want to thank all the people in the corporate field. I want to thank each and every person of the private sector, not only the hospitals and the private institutions and the doctors, but philanthropic acts. I will not take names, but each and every person has come up in a huge way. India was a country which did not know much about PPE kits. We didn't know about hand sanitizers. We did not know about N95 masks. We had a huge shortage of ventilators. And guess what? In a couple of months, we reached an over supply volume in which we were actually helping the other unfortunate countries which were being hit by this COVID by exporting them. So I think the private sector has stood up in a huge way. And I'm sure we will see more and more of interactive and collaborative initiatives and innovations between the government and the private. But I want to thank each and every person, but with a rider that the war is still not over. Our battle is still on. Do not forget your mask. Do not forget to wash your hands. Don't go out unnecessarily. Do not socialize when it is not important. Try to work as much as from home. This last part of this battle is this year. I think we will come out relatively much better, but be careful. And thank you to every person who's involved, not only in the vaccination, but in the treatment, the media, the public awareness campaigns, the social media. Every person has played a huge and vital role.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bagai, for your time, insights into the world of vaccine and the COVID-19 vaccination drive. I'm sure this will be very useful to our audience. As suggested by Dr. Bagai, let's thank all those who have helped in this vaccination drive. And to help you do this, a special hashtag Let's Win with Vaccination Facebook badge has been created. You can download this from the link in the description. Let's spread positivity around vaccination. Share your vaccination or post-vaccination selfies on social media. Tag us at Godrej Appliances and use the hashtag Let's Win with Vaccination. Do share your posts with your friends and families and spread the word. Thank you.